The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and light where the greatest minds of the galaxy gathered. Today, that chamber felt like a tomb. Taeho stood at the human podium, his dress uniform crisp and clean, while around him the alien delegates whispered in languages that made his translator buzz and click. He had been Earth's ambassador for 5 years now, but he had never seen the council like this. Fear hung in the air like smoke. The hologram at the center showed the truth. Red dots marked dead worlds. Hundreds of them. The Voidborn had eaten another system last week. 3 billion crystal people gone in a day. The week before that, a water world with floating cities. 2 billion more. We cannot stop them, said the Lyranth speaker. Its voice sounded like wind chimes, but there was no music in it today. The creature's crystal body had cracks running through it. Stress marks from too many battles. We have fought for 300 cycles. We have lost. The Orvathi delegate nodded, its large head bobbing on a thin neck. It did not speak aloud. Instead, thoughts pressed into Taeho's mind, cold and tired. The images came with the thoughts. Fleets burning. Planets cracking open. Machines that looked like metal spiders the size of moons. Perhaps we should negotiate, said another delegate. Offer them the outer worlds. Buy time. They do not negotiate, the Lyranth said. They only consume. Taeho had heard enough. He pressed the button on his podium. A tone sounded, giving him the floor. Every alien eye turned to him. Some looked curious. Most looked annoyed. Humans were new here, barely children in galactic terms. Earth had only joined the Stellar Accord 100 years ago. What could they possibly offer? Earth will take the Bastion line, Taeho said. His voice did not shake. Silence. Then laughter. It came from a dozen different species, a horrible mix of sounds. The Lyranth's chiming grew sharp. The Orvathi's thoughts turned into something like static in his head. With respect, Ambassador, the Lyranth said, though respect was nowhere in its tone. Your species has no plasma shields. Your ships are slow. You have no quantum weapons, no psionic abilities. What makes you think you can hold what we could not? Taeho looked at the hologram. The Bastion line was a chain of stations and defense platforms at the edge of the core worlds. It was the last wall. If it fell, nothing would stop the Voidborn from reaching the home systems. 20 trillion beings lived beyond that line. Because we are too stupid to know we should run, Taeho said, and too stubborn to quit when we should. More laughter. But Taeho tapped his datapad. A new hologram appeared. It showed a woman in military uniform, her face hard and her eyes harder. She stood on the bridge of a ship, and behind her Taeho could see crew members rushing between stations. This is Commander Hyun-Soo, Taeho said. She leads Earth's expeditionary fleet. Commander, please tell the Council what you told me this morning. Hyun-Soo looked out at the assembled aliens. She did not smile. She did not bow. She simply spoke. Give us 3 months, she said. If we fail, you lose nothing. You were already planning to abandon the line, but if we buy you even a little time, maybe you can find another way to fight. Maybe you can evacuate more civilians. Maybe you can save just one more world, she paused. Humans are good at buying time with blood. We have done it for thousands of years on our own planet. We know how to hold a line. The Lyranth started to object, but the Orvathi raised one long finger. Thoughts pressed into the chamber, and Taeho felt them like a weight on his chest. The Orvathi was old, perhaps the oldest being there, and it had seen things humans could not imagine. Let them try, the thought said. What harm can it do? We have already lost. The vote took less than a minute. The council agreed. Not because they believed, but because they had nothing left to believe in. Earth could have the Bastion line. Earth could throw itself against the Voidborn. When humans failed, the council would retreat deeper into the core and prepare for the end. Taeho bowed and stepped away from the podium. He did not feel victorious. He felt tired. He had just volunteered his people for a suicide mission, and everyone in the chamber knew it. 2 weeks later, Hyun-Soo arrived at Bastion Station with 12 ships. They were small compared to the alien vessels that had once defended this place. No sleek curves or glowing energy fields. Human ships looked like metal boxes with engines stuck on the back. The indomitable Hyun-Soo's flagship was the largest. It had been built in Earth's orbit, put together by workers who did not even know it would leave the solar system. The station commander, a Lyranth named Crystalline Song of Morning, which humans just called Crystal, met Hyun-Soo at the airlock. Crystal's body flickered with patterns that the translator said meant skepticism. Your ships are very small, Crystal said. Small is good, Hyun-Soo replied. Small is hard to hit. She walked through the station with her officers behind her. Captain Dong-wook carried a data pad, his fingers flying across it as he took notes. Engineer Yuna stopped to look at every system they passed, her eyes sharp and calculating. Medical Officer Hirin counted beds in the hospital wing, and Sergeant Kinam walked with his hand near his sidearm, watching doorways out of habit. The station's command center showed why the aliens had given up. Holographic displays marked void-borne positions. There were thousands of contacts, maybe tens of thousands. They sat just beyond sensor range, waiting. Building. Soon they would come. The previous commanders all fled, Crystal said. Its chiming voice carried sadness. They took the best ships and left only defense platforms. You have arrived just in time to die with those of us too slow to run. Hyun-Soo studied the displays. She did not look afraid. She looked focused, the way a doctor looks at a disease they plan to cure. Maybe, she said. Or maybe we arrived just in time to teach you how humans fight. She turned to her officers. Dong-wook, I want full tactical analysis by tomorrow. Yuna, start looking at their defense systems. I bet we can make them better. Hirin, set up a medical center. When this starts, there will be wounded. Kinam, start training drills. I want every being on this station to know how to hold a rifle. You plan to resist? Crystal asked. Its patterns flickered in what might have been confusion. We plan to win, Hyun-Soo said. Outside the station, in the dark between stars, the Voidborn waited. Their sensors watched the human ships arrive. Their computers calculated the threat level. It came back as negligible. These new beings had primitive technology in small numbers. The Voidborn dismissed them and continued their preparations. In 3 months, they would attack. In 3 months, they would consume the Bastion line like they had consumed everything else. They did not know that humans were not like everything else. The first week was the hardest. Not because of fighting, but because of change. Dong-wook stood in the tactical center staring at the defense plans the aliens had left behind. They made his head hurt. Every ship had a specific position. Every platform had an exact firing solution. Everything was planned down to the second. It looked perfect on paper. This is garbage, he said to Crystal, who had stayed behind to help the humans. No wonder you lost. Crystal's patterns flickered with offense. Those plans were created by the finest military minds in the Accord. Thousands of simulations proved their effectiveness. Against what? Dong-wook asked. Against enemies who follow rules? The Voidborn do not care about your perfect formations. He highlighted sections of the plan. Look, you put all your heavy ships here in a wall. Very impressive. Very strong. But what happens when the enemy just goes around? They cannot go around. We have calculated every approach vector. You calculated what a smart enemy would do, Dong-wook said. But the Voidborn are not smart. They are just endless. They will throw ships at you until something breaks and your perfect plan falls apart the moment anything unexpected happens. He pulled up human battle records from Earth's history. Battles where smaller forces beat larger ones. Fights where chaos and confusion became weapons. We do not plan every detail. We plan to adapt. It is messier, but it works. Crystal watched the human battles play out on the screen. Ships breaking formation. Units moving without orders. Attacks coming from unexpected angles. It looked like disorder. But somehow the humans kept winning. I do not understand, Crystal admitted. Good, Dong-wook said. Neither will the Voidborn. While Dong-wook tore apart the tactical plans, Yuna was tearing apart the station's weapon systems. Literally. She stood on a platform outside the hull in a pressure suit, a plasma torch in her hands cutting away alien technology. You are destroying the defense grid, an alien engineer shouted over the radio. Its panic made the translator crackle. I am fixing it, Yuna said calmly. She pulled away a section of alien weapon housing and looked inside. Beautiful technology. Energy weapons that could hit targets light seconds away. But they were networked together, all talking to each other through quantum links. If the Voidborn hack one weapon, they hack all weapons, she said. Your fancy systems are a weakness. She started installing human equipment. Simple railguns that used magnets to throw metal slugs. Chemical explosives that went boom when triggered. Fire control systems that ran on separate computers, each one isolated from the others. These are primitive, the alien engineer said. These cannot be hacked, Yuna replied. And primitive works when fancy fails. She worked for 16 hours straight, modifying weapons, installing backups, creating chaos in the neat alien systems. Other human engineers joined her, and soon the station bristled with a mix of technology. Plasma cannons next to railguns, quantum missiles next to chemical rockets. It looked like a mess. Wait until you see it fire, Una said. In the medical wing, Hiren was causing her own revolution. The alien hospital was clean and efficient, but it moved too slowly. Patients waited in diagnosis tubes while machines scanned them. Treatment happened after careful analysis. People die while you scan them, Hiren said. She brought in human medical equipment. Trauma kits with simple tools, drugs that worked fast instead of perfect, techniques her grandmother had used in Earth's wars. An Orvathi doctor watched her work with something like horror in its thoughts. You cut into them without full diagnosis? I stopped the bleeding first, Hiren said. She was training alien medical staff to triage, to decide who needed help now versus who could wait. Diagnostics mean nothing if the patient is dead. She showed them how to treat shock, how to seal wounds quickly, how to keep beings alive long enough to get them to the nice scanning machines. The alien doctors resisted at first. This was not how medicine was supposed to work. Then a construction accident happened. An alien worker fell 3 levels and landed hard. The Orvathi doctor started running diagnostics. Hiren pushed it aside, jammed a needle into the victim's arm, and started pumping fluids. Her hands moved fast, patching and sealing, stabilizing and supporting. The worker lived. It should have died in the time it took to scan it, but it lived. After that, the alien doctors stopped arguing. Sergeant Keenom had perhaps the strangest job. He stood in a training room facing 24 aliens of 6 different species. Some were soldiers. Most were station crew who had never held a weapon. They all looked at him like he was crazy. You want us to fight in corridors? A Lyranth soldier asked. We are space naval forces. We fight ship to ship. And when they board your ship? Keenom asked. When they break through the hull and start killing your crew? Silence, then you fight room to room, door to door. You make them pay for every meter. He held up a simple rifle, human-made, using bullets instead of energy. This is your friend. Learn it, love it. It will save your life. He spent days teaching them to fight in close spaces, how to use corners, how to set ambushes, how to think like a soldier instead of a ship captain. The aliens were clumsy at first. They kept trying to form neat lines to follow procedures. Keenom made them fight in the dark, made them fight in smoke, made them fight when their communicators were jammed. He taught them that war was not clean or fair and victory did not care about rules. I hate this, one alien said during a drill. Good, Keenom replied. The Voidborn will hate it more. 2 months passed. The Bastion line changed. The neat military station became something new. A hybrid of human chaos and alien precision. The other species in the Accord watched from far away, taking notes, expecting failure. Then the Voidborn sent a probe fleet. 10 ships, scouts checking the defenses. They expected the same neat formations they had seen before. They expected predictable responses. Lieutenant Dae-jung waited for them in a small human frigate, the Defiant. He had volunteered for this mission knowing it was almost certainly suicide. His ship drifted like debris, powered down, looking dead. 5 more human ships did the same, scattered through the approach vector. The Voidborn scouts scanned the station. They saw some active defenses, but not the full picture. They moved closer. Their formations were perfect, their spacing exact. Machines did not make mistakes. Dae-jung watched them on passive sensors. When the scouts passed between the dead human ships, he gave the order. Now, the human ships powered up in seconds. Their simple systems came online fast, no warm-up time needed. Railguns fired, filling space with metal. Chemical missiles launched, too dumb to be jammed or hacked. The scouts tried to adapt, but they were surrounded. It was over in 3 minutes. 8 scouts destroyed, 1 damaged and retreating. The last one broke apart when Dae-jung rammed it, his shields failing and his hull buckling, but his crew all in the evacuation pods already. The damaged scout limped back to the Voidborn fleet and transmitted what it had seen. Defenses that activated instantly, weapons that could not be hacked, ships that fought with no network to disrupt, tactics that made no sense. The Voidborn analyzed the data. Their conclusion: these new beings were inefficient and primitive. Defeating them would require slightly more force than expected. They began preparing a larger attack. On Bastion Station, Hyun-soo watched the tactical display as recovery crews picked up Dae-jung and his people. The lieutenant was banged up but alive, grinning like a fool despite his broken arm. They took the bait, Dong-wook said. They think we are weak, Hyun-soo replied. Good. Let them think that for a while longer. Crystal approached her, its patterns shifting in what humans had learned to recognize as respect. You won, it said, sounding surprised. We survived, Hyun-soo corrected. The real fight has not started yet. But for the first time in 300 cycles, the beings on Bastion Station felt something they had forgotten. Hope. The attack came on the first day of the third month, exactly when Dong-wook predicted it would. The Voidborn did not believe in surprises. They believed in overwhelming force. Hyun-soo stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the sensor displays fill with red contacts. The tactical computer tried to count them and gave up after 3,000. More kept coming, pouring out of jump points like insects from a disturbed nest. That is 3 times larger than their previous attacks, Crystal said. The Labyrinth's patterns had gone dark with fear. We cannot win this. Around them, alien crew members looked at their stations with hollow eyes. They had seen this before. They knew how it ended. Ships would fire until their weapons ran dry. Defense platforms would fall one by one. Then the station would crack open and everyone inside would die. Hyun-soo felt the fear in the air, thick enough to touch. But she had lived through fear before in the training simulations. In the cold equations that said humans should never have made it to space. Fear was familiar. Fear was just another thing to push through. Crystal, she said quietly, give the evacuation order. All non-essential personnel to the escape ships. You are abandoning the station? Crystal asked. I am saving who I can save, Hyun-soo replied. But anyone who wants to fight can stay. Crystal gave the order. Throughout the station, beings rushed to evacuation craft. The smart ones, the ones who wanted to live, started running. But something strange happened. Not everyone ran. Alien soldiers who had trained with Kinam stayed at their posts. Engineers who had worked with Yuna powered up weapons. Medical staff who had learned from Hirin prepped the trauma centers. Even some of the civilians stayed, taking positions at damage control stations. Why are you still here? Hyun-soo asked Crystal. The Labyrinth's patterns shifted through colors humans had no names for. Because someone once told me that humans are too stupid to run and too stubborn to quit. I thought it was an insult. Now I think it might be a virtue worth learning. Hyun-soo smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone about to do something crazy. Dong-wook execute plan madness. That is really what we are calling it? Dong-wook asked from his tactical station. You have a better name for flying a warship straight into an enemy fleet? Not really, no. The Indomitable and 5 human destroyers broke formation. The alien ships on the line watched in confusion as the human vessels accelerated directly toward the incoming Voidborn fleet. It looked like a suicide charge. It was a suicide charge, but it was also something else. Commander Sung-min led the destroyers. He was older than Hyun-soo, had fought in Earth's colony wars, and knew that sometimes you had to sacrifice the queen to win the game. His crew was volunteer, every single person. They knew this was a one-way trip. The Voidborn fleet did not change course. Why would they? 6 small ships could not stop 3,000. Their computers calculated impact times and optimal firing solutions. Everything was proceeding as expected. Range in 30 seconds, Sung-min said over the comm. His voice was steady. It has been an honor. The honor is ours, Hyun-soo replied. At the last moment, when the human ships were seconds from impact, they did something the Voidborn did not expect. They overloaded their reactors. Not to make them explode, but to create the biggest electromagnetic pulse they could generate. 6 ships became 6 bombs of pure energy. The blast did not destroy the Voidborn fleet. It blinded them. Every sensor, every communication link, every targeting system went dark at once. 3,000 warships suddenly could not see, could not coordinate, could not fight. They drifted in the dark, their computers resetting, their systems struggling to reboot. Now, Hyun-soo shouted. From behind the station, hidden by its bulk, 50 small human fighters launched. They were tiny things, barely larger than escape pods, with 1 pilot and 1 weapon. Pilot Young-ho led the squadron, his hands steady on the controls despite his racing heart. The fighters dove into the blind Voidborn fleet like hawks into mice. They were too small for the big weapons to track and too fast for the ships to hit, While their sensors rebooted, Young Ho fired missiles into exhaust ports, dropped mines next to reactors, and used his ship's guns to saw through sensor arrays. Behind the fighters came the boarding teams. Major Bo Young sat in a drop pod with 30 soldiers, both human and alien. They wore heavy armor and carried simple weapons, nothing electronic that the Voidborn could hack. As the pod punched through a Voidborn ship's hull, she remembered Keenom's training. In close combat, the side that hesitates dies first. Do not hesitate, the pod doors blew open. Voidborn drones turned toward them, weapons charging. Bo Young fired first. Her shotgun used chemical shells, old Earth technology. The drone's shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They did nothing against solid slugs moving at high speed. Move! 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 She shouted. Her team poured out, spreading through the corridors. The Voidborn had never fought like this. Their ships were designed for space combat, not hallway brawls. They had no tactics for enemies who came inside, who turned their own corridors into death traps. Bo Young's team fought deck by deck. When the drones adapted and brought in heavier units, the soldiers used mining charges to drop ceilings on them. When the Voidborn sealed doors, they cut through walls. When the ship's AI tried to vent atmosphere, they sealed their suits and kept fighting in vacuum. It was brutal, ugly combat. Nothing like the clean space battles the aliens were used to. It was the kind of fighting humans had perfected over thousands of years of killing each other. On another Voidborn ship, Intelligence Officer Jae Min had a different mission. While Bo Young's team caused chaos, he slipped through maintenance tunnels toward the ship's command core. He was not a soldier. He was a tech specialist, small and quick, good at being unseen. The tunnels were dark and cold. Things moved in the shadows. Maintenance drones doing their programmed tasks. Jamin avoided them, his heart pounding, his hands sweating inside his gloves. He had studied Voidborn ship layouts for months. He knew where the brains of these things lived. The command core sat in the center of the ship, a room full of processing units and data conduits. Jamin had expected guards, defenses, something. Instead, he found nothing but machines. The Voidborn did not think anyone would ever get this far inside. He plugged his portable computer into the core's systems. Human encryption met Voidborn programming. For a moment, nothing happened. Then data started flowing. Jamin read it, his eyes going wide. No way, he whispered. The Voidborn were not evil. They were not invaders. They were following orders from a war that ended 10,000 years ago. Their creators, an ancient species whose name was lost, had programmed them to fight until the enemy was destroyed. But the enemy was long dead. The Voidborn did not know how to stop. They just kept going, killing and consuming because that was what their code told them to do. "Command, this is Jamin," he said into his comm. "I have found something. The Voidborn are not our enemy. They are victims." On the Indomitable, Hyun-Soo heard his report while managing the battle. Around her, displays showed fighters dying, boarding teams being cut off, defense platforms exploding. They were losing, slowly but certainly. "Can we stop them?" she asked. "Maybe," Jamin said. "There should be deactivation codes, shutdown commands built into their original programming. But I would need access to their central nexus, wherever that is." Dong-wook pulled up star charts. "There," he said, pointing to a dead zone deep in Voidborn territory. "That is where they all came from. That is where it started." Hyun-Soo looked at the tactical display. They were barely surviving here against one fleet. The central nexus would have thousands more ships. It would be impossible. "Get Jamin back here," she said. "We need to tell the council about this. And then what?" Crystal asked. "And then we do the impossible," Hyun-Soo said. "Because that is what humans do." The battle raged for 6 more hours. When it finally ended, the Bastion line still stood, but just barely. 200 defense platforms were gone. 7 alien ships destroyed. The station's hull was scarred and breached in a dozen places. The Voidborn fleet, blinded and confused, had eventually retreated to regroup. Hyun-Soo walked through the medical bay, where Hee-Rin and her staff worked to save the wounded. She saw aliens and humans lying side by side, bleeding the same, hurting the same. She saw survivors who looked at her with something new in their eyes. Belief. They had held. Against impossible odds, with crazy tactics and desperate courage, they had held. The Bastion line had not fallen. But Hyun-Soo knew the truth. They had won one battle. The Voidborn would come back with more ships, more force. Eventually, the line would break, unless they struck first. Unless they went to the source and ended this war for good. She made her decision. She would ask the council for permission to attack the Nexus, and if they said no, she would go anyway. The council said no. Of course they did. Tai-Ho stood before them again, showing Jamin's data, explaining the deactivation codes, begging for ships and support. The assembled delegates listened with the patience of beings who had already made up their minds. "You want us to attack the heart of void-born space," the Lyranth speaker said. "You want us to send our remaining fleets to a place no one has returned from in 300 cycles. This is madness. This is our only chance," Tai-Ho argued. "If we end this at the source, we save everyone. We stop the killing. We cannot risk it," an Orvathi delegate thought at him. The images that came with the thought showed fleets disappearing into dark space, civilizations waiting for rescue that never came. "We must preserve what we have, consolidate, defend the core worlds." "And when the Voidborn reach the core worlds?" Tai-Ho asked. "When they come for your families, your home planets, will you defend them, or will you consolidate further back? How far will you run?" No answer came. They had already decided. They would not help. Tai-Ho left the council chamber feeling hollow. He walked to his quarters and sent a message to Hyun-Soo. Just 2 words: they refused. Her reply came an hour later. 4 words: then we go anyway. 5 days later, a fleet gathered at the Bastion line. It was not the council's fleet. It was not the Accord's military. It was volunteers. Ships from Earth arrived first, civilian vessels that had been modified for war, colony transports with weapons welded to their hulls, mining ships carrying missiles instead of equipment, even a few passenger liners, their luxury cabins converted to barracks. Captain Tae-Sung commanded the largest of them, a heavy freighter called the Steadfast. He had moved cargo for 20 years before the war. Now he moved soldiers in hope. "This is stupid," his first officer said, looking at the fleet assembling around them. "We are going to die." "Probably," Tae-Sung agreed. "But at least we will die doing something that matters." Alien ships came too, though fewer. Crystal brought a Lyranth cruiser with a crew that had fought at the Bastion line. An Orvathi science vessel joined them, its captain insisting that someone should document what happened for history. A dozen smaller craft from various species, all volunteers, all knowing this might be a one-way trip. They called themselves Fate's Hammer. 63 ships total. It was nothing compared to the forces the Voidborn had in their territory. But it was what they had. Hyun-Soo addressed the fleet before they jumped. Her face appeared on every ship's main screen, tired but determined. "I will not lie to you," she said. "Where we are going, most of us will not come back. The Voidborn have thousands of ships protecting their nexus. We have 63. The odds are not good." She paused, letting that sink in. Some crews looked afraid. Others looked resigned. All of them stayed at their posts. "But we are not going there to win a battle," Hyun-Soo continued. "We are going there to end a war. Somewhere in that nexus is a shutdown command that will stop the Voidborn forever. If we can reach it, if we can activate it, then every being who died in the last 300 cycles will not have died for nothing." She looked directly into the camera. "I asked you to come. Each of you made a choice. Thank you for making it. Thank you for being brave. Now let us go change the galaxy." The jump into Voidborn territory took 3 hours. When they emerged, space was waiting. Not empty space, but space filled with ships. The sensors could not count them all. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands, all turning toward the small human fleet. "Well," Dong-Wook said from his station on the Indomitable, "at least we will not die bored." The Voidborn did not waste time on warnings or communications. They simply attacked. Wave after wave of ships, coordinated and precise. Fate's hammer scattered, each ship fighting its own battle while trying to push toward the Nexus. Young-Ho and his fighter squadron launched immediately. They were fast and small, drawing fire away from the larger ships. Young-Ho saw 2 of his squadron die in the first minute, their fighters vaporized by Voidborn plasma. He kept flying, kept shooting, because stopping meant dying and dying meant failing. Tae-Sung's Steadfast took a hit that tore through 3 decks. Emergency systems sealed the breach, but 20 people were dead. He adjusted course, fired his makeshift weapons, and kept pushing forward. Around him, civilian ships fought like warships, their crews learning combat on the job or dying in the attempt. The Indomitable led the charge, Hyun-Soo at the helm. Her ship's shields were failing, her weapons running low on ammunition. It did not matter. What mattered was the distance to the Nexus, slowly shrinking on the tactical display. Scout Subin was ahead of everyone, her small recon ship threading through the void-born fleet like a needle through cloth. She had volunteered to find the path to the Nexus, to map the way through all those enemy vessels. Her sensors picked up something odd. Ancient stations dead for millennia, floating in a pattern around the Nexus. Command, this is Subin. I see structures here. Old, pre-Voidborn. They look like they were built by whoever made the Voidborn in the first place. Scientist Yun Young was on the Indomitable, working with Jae-min to understand the Voidborn code. She pulled up the sensor data from Subin's ship. Her breath caught. Those are control stations, she said. They were meant to deactivate the Voidborn after the war ended. But they were never activated. Why not? Hyun-soo asked while dodging fire from a Voidborn cruiser. Maybe whoever built them died before they could, Yun Young said. Maybe the war killed everyone before they could shut down their own weapons. But the stations are still there. Still functional, I think. Can we use them? Dong-wook asked. Yun Young studied the data. Her face went pale. Yes. But someone would need to interface directly with the main station, manually input the deactivation codes, and the feedback from connecting to that much ancient technology would be lethal. Silence on the bridge. Everyone understood. To shut down the Voidborn, someone had to die. Hyun-soo opened fleet-wide communications. All ships, new objective. We are making for those ancient stations. Protect the ground team at all costs. What ground team? Dong-wook asked. Whoever volunteers, Hyun-soo said quietly. The call went out across the fleet. They needed soldiers to land on the main station, fight their way to the control center, and activate the shutdown sequence. It was a guaranteed death sentence. Not might die, would die. Every soldier volunteered. Dong-wook had to choose. He picked 30, including himself. Bo-young would lead them. Jae-min would handle the technical work. Yun Young insisted on coming to manage the interface. You are too valuable, Taeho told her over the comm. He had joined the fleet in a council shuttle, unable to stay behind while others fought. Then make sure my death means something, Yun Young replied. They loaded into drop pods while the fleet fought to get them close. Tae-sung rammed his Steadfast into a Voidborn battleship, sacrificing his ship to open a gap. Young-ho's remaining fighters flew suicide runs, buying seconds with their lives. The Indomitable took hit after hit, its hull buckling but kept pushing forward. The pods launched. 30 soldiers and 2 scientists falling toward an ancient station, while death filled the space around them. Half the pods did not make it. Enemy fire caught them, turning brave people into debris. The survivors hit the station hard, cutting through the hull, racing inside. The station was a tomb, dead for thousands of years, dark and cold. Dong-wook led them through corridors filled with skeletons of the species that had built this place. They had names once, families, hopes. Now they were dust and bone, their war outliving them by millennia. Voidborn drones followed them inside. Kanam and the Marines held the rear, fighting deck by deck. When Mina's squad ran out of ammunition, they used pipes torn from the walls, fighting with metal bars against machines. Warrant Officer Mina took a hit that nearly cut her in half, but she kept fighting until the medic physically dragged her back. They reached the control center. It was enormous, a cathedral of ancient technology. In the center sat an interface station, still glowing with faint power after all these years. Jae-min approached it with his datapad, downloading the deactivation codes they had found. This will work, he said. I am sure of it. But someone needs to manually input the command, Yun Young said. She looked at the interface chair. It had connectors, ports meant to link directly to a nervous system. The station's safety protocols are offline. There is no way to buffer the feedback. Whoever sits in that chair will burn out from the inside. Dong-wook stepped forward. I will do it. No, Yun Young said firmly. You are needed to lead these people out. I understand the system better. It has to be me. Taeho's voice came over the comm from somewhere in the station. He had been hit during the landing, his leg broken, but he had crawled through the corridors to reach them. Wait, there is no time to argue, Yun Young said. She sat in the chair before anyone could stop her. The connectors moved on their own, ancient mechanisms still functioning, reaching for her. She looked at Taeho and smiled. Make sure they remember we tried. The connectors pierced her skin. She screamed. Pain, more pain than anyone should feel and still live. The ancient technology had not been designed for human nervous systems. It tore through Yun Young's mind like fire, overwhelming every sense. She could feel the entire network, millions of void-born ships connected through quantum links. all of them humming with deadly purpose, and beneath it all, she felt the original programming, the war code, the commands that had turned peaceful construction machines into endless killers. She could see the tragedy of it. Creators who had built perfect soldiers but died before they could shut them down. A species erased by its own creation. Her hands moved across the interface, guided by instinct and training. Blood ran from her nose, her ears. Her body was failing, but she could see the deactivation sequence, could feel the path to ending this. Tejo reached her, pulling himself forward on his broken leg. He grabbed her hand. "Stop, please, we can find another way." She looked at him, her eyes already going dim. "There is no other way. There never was." Her fingers found the final command. She pressed it. Across the galaxy, the change happened in an instant. Void-born ships, millions of them, simply stopped. Their weapons powered down. Their engines went silent. The machines that had killed for 300 cycles went dark, their ancient war finally over. On the Indomitable, Hyun-Soo watched her tactical display as red contacts turned gray. Enemy ships drifted dead in space. Around her, bridge crew sat in stunned silence. "Did we win?" Someone asked. "Check it," Hyun-Soo said. "Make sure." They checked. Every void-born ship was offline. Every weapon system inactive. Even the ones attacking the fleet had stopped mid-firing sequence. They hung in space like abandoned toys. "It worked," Crystal whispered. Its patterns flickered through every color at once. By all the stars, it actually worked. Cheers erupted across the fleet, a mix of alien voices and human shouts. Ships that had been seconds from death found themselves suddenly safe. Crews embraced each other, crying with relief and disbelief. But Hyun-Soo did not cheer. She looked at the casualty reports coming in. 42 ships destroyed, thousands dead, and in the command center on the ancient station, the vital signs monitor for Yun-Young had flatlined. Young-Ho landed his damaged fighter on what was left of the Indomitable's flight deck. He climbed out on shaking legs, the last survivor of his squadron. 12 had launched with him. 12 friends who had died so he could keep flying. He sat down on the deck and cried. Taesung's Steadfast was gone, along with its captain and crew. Crystal's cruiser had lost half its hull. The Orvathi science vessel drifted without power, its crew alive but trapped. All across the fleet, the cost of victory became clear. On the station, Dongwook gently disconnected Yun-Young from the interface. Her body was still warm. Tejo held her hand, his face wet with tears. Around them, the surviving Marines stood in silence, honoring the fallen. "She saved us all," Bo-Young said quietly. "Every living being in the galaxy. They should build statues." "They probably will," Dongwook said. But she would not care about statues. She just wanted to make things right. Jaemin was downloading data from the ancient station, preserving what he could. There was so much knowledge here, so much lost history. The species that had built this place, that had created the Voidborn, they deserved to be remembered too. Mina, bleeding from a dozen wounds, helped the wounded Marines toward the extraction point. Keenam carried 2 soldiers who could not walk, one under each arm. They moved slowly, tiredly through the dead station. Behind them lay bodies of friends who had not made it this far. The evacuation took hours. Ships collected survivors, tended to wounded, counted the missing. Medical bays overflowed. Hyren worked until she collapsed from exhaustion, then woke up and kept working. Subin flew search patterns looking for escape pods and survivors. Yuna and her engineers worked miracles, keeping damaged ships functional long enough to get everyone home. The journey back to the Bastion line was somber. No one celebrated. They had won, yes, but the price had been terrible. 63 ships had gone to the Nexus. 21 came back. Of the 15,000 beings who had volunteered for Fate's Hammer, fewer than 6,000 survived. But they had ended the war. Word spread quickly. The Voidborn had stopped. Across the galaxy, species that had fled their homes began returning. Worlds that had been preparing for evacuation stood down. The 300-cycle nightmare was over. The council called an emergency session. This time, when Tejo entered the chamber, every delegate stood. They did not speak. They simply bowed, each species in their own way. Respect, gratitude, shame, perhaps, that they had not believed. The Stellar Accord owes humanity a debt we cannot repay. The Lyranth speaker said, "You did what we could not. You saved us when we had given up hope." "It was not just humans," Tejo said quietly. "Aliens fought with us." "Died with us?" Crew from a dozen species volunteered knowing they would not come home. Honor them, remember them, and never forget what desperation made us willing to sacrifice. The council voted to build a memorial at the Nexus, a station orbiting the ancient control center where Young had given her life. They would preserve the site, tell the story, ensure that future generations knew what happened here. One galactic cycle passed. A year in human terms, the galaxy rebuilt. With the voidborn threat gone, trade resumed. Colonies expanded. The Accord grew stronger. But it changed too. The rigid military structure gave way to something more flexible. Tactics became more adaptive. Species learned from humans, and humans learned from them in return. Hyunsu became Admiral Hyunsu, commander of the Accord's new rapid response fleet. She trained the next generation of officers, teaching them to think creatively, to adapt, to never give up. Kinam ran the ground forces training program. Hire and established new medical protocols across the Accord. Dongwook designed defense strategies that mixed alien precision with human chaos. Young Ho took over what was left of the fighter corps. Subin mapped new regions of space, always looking for threats before they became crises. Yuna and Jaemin worked together, combining human engineering with alien technology to create new wonders. The Bastion line became a symbol. They expanded it into a station complex, a place where beings from across the galaxy came to train, to serve, to prepare for whatever threats might come. Crystal served as its commander, having learned from humans that sometimes the best leaders are those who learn to change. Taeho stood before the memorial wall at the new station. 20,000 names were carved there, every being who died during the Voidborn War's final campaign. He found Young's name, ran his fingers across it. He came here often when decisions weighed heavy. Still talking to ghosts? Hyunsu asked, joining him. She would have an opinion on this new crisis, Taeho said. Probably a better one than mine. At the galactic edge, something new had been detected. Not Voidborn. Something else. Unknown ships, strange signals. Maybe hostile. Maybe not. The Accord was debating how to respond. What do you think? Hyunsu asked. Taeho looked at the memorial, at all those names. Heroes who had answered when others could not. Ordinary people who became extraordinary because the moment demanded it. I think we do what we always do, he said. We go see what it is. We try to help if we can. We fight if we must. And we never ever give up. You're starting to sound human, Hyunsu said with a small smile. Strange, Taeho replied. I am human. I think you mean I sound like humanity's soldiers. The ones who changed fate when despair gripped the stars. They walked together through the station. Around them, beings of 100 species went about their duties. Training, learning, preparing. Not because they expected war, but because they had learned that peace was something you fought to preserve. In the main auditorium, new recruits were being sworn in. Humans and aliens standing together, pledging to defend the Accord, to protect the innocent, to stand firm when darkness came. A young Lyranth raised its crystal hand. Sir, what if we face something we cannot beat? Something worse than the Voidborn? Taeho looked at the recruit. He remembered asking similar questions once. He remembered being terrified and uncertain. He remembered Young smiling as she chose to die so others could live. Then we do what our predecessors did, he said. We try anyway. Because maybe we will fail. Maybe the odds will be impossible. But the only way we guarantee failure is if we do not try at all. He looked across the assembled recruits, seeing hope in their faces. You are part of something now. Something that started when a few humans stood at the Bastion line and refused to run. Not because they were special. Not because they were heroes. But because when the moment came, they chose to be. The recruits saluted. The ceremony continued. Life went on. At the edge of the galaxy, the unknown signals grew stronger. Soon someone would have to investigate. Soon, there would be another crisis, another threat. Another moment when everything hung in the balance. But the Accord was no longer the same. They had learned from humanity. They had learned to adapt, to fight dirty, to never quit. They had learned that sometimes the smallest, weakest, most primitive species could teach the oldest and wisest something new. They had learned that hope was not about knowing you would win. Hope was about trying anyway.